Welcome back. This section is really exciting as we'll be looking at very powerful tools: cloning, spot healing brush, and the healing brush. These are tools you'll most likely use when correcting your images. In the previous sections, we talked about using the brush tool to cover an object by painting over the background. We also talked about the limitations of doing so. By the end of this section, you would have learned how to remove objects from your images, clone objects to your images, and extend your images without stretching them. On top of that, we will be teaching you how you can remove skin imperfections such as blemishes, acne, or scars, and change your own facial features such as giving yourself bigger eyes. All of this can be done through cloning. So, let's go on ahead and see how we can achieve such corrections. In this video, we are going to show you how you can use the clone tool and what you can achieve using it. I'll first show you how the clone tool works. Select the clone tool over here and make sure that the tool you are selecting is the clone stamp tool. You'll see a circle appearing like so. The clone stamp tool actually works very similarly to the brush tool, so you can see that their properties are very similar. You can use the left and right brackets shortcut to increase and decrease the size for the clone tool as well. With a normal brush, you are usually painting only one solid color, but with the clone stamp tool, you can paint on the layer itself. In other words, you are cloning selected regions of the layer using the tool. So, how do we do this? First, select the source, which is the layer you would like cloned. Hold the alternate key and the sniper icon will appear, and left-click on your intended source. After selecting your source, notice how the circle here gives you a preview of it. Now, all you have to do is paint the way you do with a brush tool. You can always change your source or set the source as the new area that you just painted with the clone tool. So, that's clone tool in an essence. Select the source, then paint over it. Let's try using the clone tool to remove the red hat in this image. To do so, we will be first cloning the rock, then using the cover-up method to cover the red hat. So what we're doing is not actually removing the hat, but painting a rock over it. Let's select the source to the surrounding rock the way I taught you. Set the source near the object and paint over the hat with the surrounding rocks. Reset your source often to sample the nearest pixels so that you can get the most accurate result. I mainly use the hard and soft brush for cloning. To touch up on the image and make the cloned area look realistic, you can select the soft brush and lower the opacity. Then, paint over it a few times to blend the cloned area. Spend some time touching up on this area to ensure that you are doing a clean job. Here's some shortcuts you can use while doing so. First, you can zoom in so that you can paint more accurately by pressing Ctrl, spacebar, followed by a left click. Then, move around the canvas by holding the spacebar and the left click to drag your canvas along. When you feel your image is alright, zoom out by pressing Alternate plus spacebar, followed by the left click. We have successfully removed the unwanted red hat by adding in the necessary background. Now, what if we want to clone the object instead? We want many red hats. We can do that by again selecting the source and then adding to the original image. Next, we will be teaching you how you can extend your image without stretching it using the clone tool. First, increase the canvas size and use the anchor point to the top of the image. Now, we have a white space at the top. We then use the clone tool to clone this background onto the top. Take note that you won't be able to use the brush tool as the background is not a solid color. It has a texture. Let's use the clone stamp tool now to clone the image by selecting the source and painting over it. As per the red hat example, you have to spend some time touching up and creating the new background on top, which requires some patience if you want a clean touch-up. I only use the hard brush, soft brush, and occasionally lower the opacity of the clone tool. Since this is only for tutorial purposes, I will not spend much time perfecting the background. But on your own, do spend some time making sure the cloned area looks decent enough. I highly encourage you to download these two pictures from the attachment and try out the clone stamp tool for yourself. You will realize that with the clone stamp tool, you are now capable of manipulating images and doing endless kinds of tasks. However, there are more to the clone stamp tool that you should be aware of, and I will show them to you in the next video. In the previous video, we have seen how to use the clone tool. Let's say we want to clone this balloon. Now we have a problem. We are cloning in the same layer. What this means is that you cannot move only the cloned area or delete the cloned area away. What if you want to revert to the original image? A much better way is to draw the cloned area onto a new layer. What you want to do is to create a new layer by going to Layer, New Layer, or use the shortcut Ctrl-Shift-N. Now, select the Clone Stamp tool and set this option at the top here to Current and Below. Current and Below means you are going to sample everything from this layer and below it. So essentially, you are going to clone the same way. Select your source and clone them. This time, since you're at a new layer, your resulting painting lies on a new layer. So you can go ahead and move your new layer independently of the original layer. You can go ahead and hide the new layer, lower the opacity, or do some filter to it. The main thing is that now, you can create a layer mask and clean up the new cloned area. So you can go ahead and delete away these unwanted edges. Now, you might realize that you have achieved the same result if you were using the selection tool, and press Ctrl J to duplicate this into a new layer. Then, you can use layer mask and achieve the same thing as what you did previously with the clone tool. In this scenario, either the clone tool or selection tool will serve the same purpose. In situations like this image, it is more appropriate to use the clone tool rather than selection tool. Let's say you don't like all these wires in the background and want to remove them. So first, create a new layer and then proceed to clone the surrounding background to remove the wire. The wires are all over the place, the sky, the building, so you'll need some patience in slowly painting over the wires. as you realize in this scenario, using selection tool and duplicating is not really going to help. What you want is to use the clone tool and paint over existing wires like this. Hopefully, you can now see the power of a clone tool and so many things you can do with the clone tool. You just need some practice on cloning and make sure you do a clean job and touch up on the cloned areas. It is also worth noting that you can create as many new layers as you want. In this case, you have even more precise control and hide or move each layer independently. The important takeaway in this video is to clone on a new layer instead of on your original layer. With a little bit more time, you'll eventually achieve the final output. You can also use the soft brush to lower the opacity to blend. And you have to do the same thing over again for the buildings. For tutorial purposes, I won't be doing everything, but in a nutshell, it will be painting over the wires with the building colors. It will really take quite some time, so patience is really important. You can continue removing the wires by doing the same thing that I did to the other buildings. Eventually, you should get a picture with no wires at all. So I'll leave you with this. Do go ahead and download the attached file and try out these exercises as well. In the previous video, we talked about clone tool. Now, let's look at two other similar tools, the spot healing brush and the healing brush tool. Let's say we want to smoothen this face. You could use the clone tool to clone the fair skin into an unwanted area, like this. It worked pretty well, but there's a much better and faster way to achieve this result, and that is using the spot healing brush tool. The spot healing brush tool is a simple one-click process. However, do note that the spot healing brush tool does not allow you to select a source. If you try to alternate plus left click it, an error will pop out. So, you simply have to go to the area you want to smoothen and left click it. Photoshop will do all the work for you. Photoshop will sample the entire circle you've clicked and try to figure out what is wrong. It will look at the color, tone, and brightness of each individual pixel and decide on the outlier. In this case, the freckles are the outlier. Hence, Photoshop will cover up the outlier to give you smoother skin. Since you can do all of this in just one click, it is much simpler than the clone tool. It is also very accurate and clean. After touching up a few more times, you end up with a very nice image, as you can see here. Another useful tool that you can use is the healing brush tool. It does the same thing as the spot healing brush tool, except that it allows you to select a source. So, go ahead and press alternate and left click to select the source. The source will be the desired color to replace the unwanted region. Hence, the difference between these tools is the ability to set a source. You can use the healing brush if your reference point, the source, is not near the unwanted region and you want to manually set it. You can use the spot healing brush if you only need to correct a small blemish. Now, what is the difference between a clone and healing brush tool? I'll show you by demonstrating both tools' abilities. I'll clone this face on the right and use the healing brush to paint over on the left. See the difference? The clone tool takes the original pixels and fully clones it as it was before, while the healing brush tool keeps the highlights and shadows of the original area, only painting the color over. So, which tool should you use in different situations? If you want to simply duplicate something, use the clone tool. For example, removing this head over here. Using the spot healing brush wouldn't work as it does not fully remove the head. You have to use the clone tool to copy the rock over the head as we did before. Remember that the healing tool keeps the highlights and shadows of the area, so it's very suitable for facial corrections such as the removal of pimples or freckles. You can also use both the healing brush and the clone tools together. They're not mutually exclusive, so you can go ahead and play around with both of them. We have seen how we can use the clone, spot healing brush, and healing brush tools in the previous videos. I've also shown you examples of how we can use the clone tool. We started by removing the red head in this picture, then extending this background above. We then cloned the hot air balloons and removed the wires in this picture and removed the freckles on this face. There are so many more things you can do with the cloning tool, such as thickening this girl's lips. You can play around with the features and give yourself thicker eyebrows, bigger eyes, or remove your nose. The clone tool allows you to do many things with your pictures. What you need is just creativity and patience. With the clone tool and the selection techniques, you can more or less do everything you want with your photo. In the next section, I'll be showing you more filters you can do in Photoshop, some of which are very commonly used. See you there!